Shalom, shalom. I'd like to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rekach Wadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who rule well. Peace, blessing, and safety to all the hopeful elect out there scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. This is the brother Abadir from the GMS Toronto camp, coming back at you with another one. And, this is just a news update. Pretty sure if you haven't heard already, um, you know, last night, well, prior to last night, Trump said Iran had 48 hours to open up the Strait of Hormuz. Then, I believe last night or early this morning, they had agreed to a so-called, ceasefire. And, whether that was real or not, it didn't last long because reports are coming out that the U.S. has violated the ceasefire agreement with Iran. And also, Israel has carried out strikes on Lebanon. I'm going to bring out an article in that right after this. I just want to play a little clip of this that explains the violation of the ceasefire.
Well, let's get to Eamon Javers. Got some breaking news on the ceasefire agreement between the U.S. and Iran, and maybe it's not related to a ceasefire at all, Eamon Javers.
Yeah, Brian, just wanted to flag this social media post for you that just dropped from the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament as we watch whether or not this ceasefire, as fragile as it is, can hold. In this social media post, the Speaker is alleging that the United States has violated 3 of Iran's principles for a ceasefire already so far. They say that the Iranians say that the United States has non-compliance with the first clause of its 10-point proposal, that the entry of a drone into Iranian airspace violates the terms of the ceasefire, and denial of Iran's right to enrichment, which was included in Iran's framework, they say, also violates the terms of the ceasefire. Now they say now the very workable basis on which to negotiate has been openly and clearly violated even before the negotiations began. In such a situation, a bilateral ceasefire or negotiations is unreasonable. So you have here the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament now saying that a ceasefire and negotiations are unreasonable due to what they say are American violations of terms that the Iranians have laid out there. And this is one of those situations, Brian, where you might want to look at sort of deeds more so than words, watch what the Iranians do over the next minutes and hours to see if there's anything behind this. But just wanted to flag that we are seeing this kind of skeptical language now from the Iranians around the ceasefire.
We have...
Yeah, so whether this ceasefire was real or not, it seems like it hasn't, last long. And, that's not surprising because, that's Esau, that's the devil. They're not to be trusted. Here you are going to try to agree with these other nations, and then as soon as they turn their back, you go and attack them. That's some coward, some coward shit right there. And then this also, Iran War Live, Israel kills 254 in Lebanon after U.S.-Iran agree ceasefire. So it says Israel has bombed locations across Lebanon, including a capital, Beirut, in devastating attacks that authorities say have killed at least 254 people and wounded more than 1,165. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had earlier said that Lebanon would not be included in the ceasefire. These devils, man. So, that like I said, that didn't last long, and we're gonna pay attention to the reports, see if more comes out, see if Iran goes and retaliates. See what happens. But, it's not surprising at all. So this is First Thessalonians 5:3. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. So, here it is that, America is trying to make peace, but, really and truly, they don't want peace, you know? They don't want peace at all. And when they talk about peace, we know, according to the scriptures, that, the sudden destruction is going to come. So, whether this, war in Iran dies down or whether it escalates, it's all playing in the hand of prophecy, because we know that there is no peace coming to America, and there's no peace coming to over there in the land of Israel. The only thing that's coming is a severe judgment and destruction. This devil is trying to do whatever it can do to try to escape, you know, the prophecies of Yahweh Shem Yahushai, and it's impossible. It's impossible. And then they're also trying to, um, they're trying to like die down the situation, trying to make it seem as if peace is even possible. You know, Iran don't want no peace with these devils. They like violence. Just like what the scriptures say, his words were smoother than butter, but war is in his heart. And that that's Esau. That be Trump. Trying to talk that smooth talk, trying to say, oh, he's come to agreement and and trying say they've came to agreement, and things are looking good. The strait has been opened up. Goods and oil can now move. Yeah, right. We know this devil loves war. You know, just the other day this guy was talking about, this guy, DJ Trump, he was talking about obliterating um Iran. He was gonna start hitting civilian targets. So this man doesn't want peace. You know, they want war. This is Micah 2 and this is Micah 2, starting it from the top. How terrible it will be, and this is in the GNT. How terrible will it be for those who lie awake and plan evil? When morning comes, as soon as they have the chance, they do the evil they plan. So that's these elite bankers who are behind the scenes, controlling everything, controlling the moves of these puppets. People think, it's Trump, or, it's, Benny over there in Israel who's controlling everything. They're just the forefront. They're just a puppet. It's these elites behind. They're the ones stirring up the pot. They're the one. They're orchestrating everything behind the scenes. You know, and we know ultimately it's Yahweh Bashim Yahushai who's the one who's controlling all this. Just Habakkuk 2 and 3, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie, though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. So, you know, we were warning Jake that, you know, war is coming. You know, despite whatever it is that this devil says, despite how he tries to downplay and smooth things out, it's coming. You know, World War III is coming. Things are gonna get chaotic. You know, things are not gonna get any better. Things are only gonna become harder. You know, harder and harder as Jacob's trouble, you know, escalates, and you know, as the mark of the beast gets, you know, is made mandatory. You know, all these things are gonna happen. You know, even though it seems like it's, you know, even though it seems like it may be taking a while, or it's just a back and forth, you know, you know, with the wars and rumors of war, you know, this is all part of the plan of Yahweh Shem Yahushai at the end of the day, you know. So, you know, that's why, you know, we don't lose faith. You know, we just you know, put out the reports, keep doing the work, and keep pushing, keep enduring. You know, people in the world, you know, will see the whole ceasefire news and get a sigh of relief, and thinking things are gonna go back to normal. You know, and that's where that peace and safety and sudden destruction, you know, it just is gonna take, you know, people off guard. So if this report is true, that, you know, the ceasefire, you know, didn't last long, and you know things are gonna continue to escalate, you know, then, you know, that's a prime example. You know, that's a prime example that shows that you know, this devil can't be trusted, and that ultimately, you know, no peace is gonna come to Babylon the Great. You know, we're in the time of war. This is the time that we're in. We're not in the time of peace. So, now that's gonna do for this, you know, quick news report. We'll see what else comes out. We'll see if Iran, you know, does more responses, or if, you know, they carry out their own attacks, you know, against Israel, and then that will just that would just um, that would just prove and even more that the ceasefire is off the table. And you know, for America and Israel to go and do this after trying to agree to a ceasefire, you know, that shows Iran, and that also shows these other nations that America cannot be trusted. You know, and it's only going to make matters worse. So that's going to do it for this. I'd like to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushai, Bahashim, Rakak, Wadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, and peace, blessing, and safety to all the Akim and Akwath who sincerely believe, and to the hopeful elect scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Lord willing, this lesson was